I know.
You're listening to the TD Show.
Touchdown Titans! There are no flags on the field! It's a miracle! Tennessee has pulled a miracle!
Broadcast live on the TDShow.com.
There goes Davis! Oh my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back! Auburn's going to win the football game! Auburn's going to win the football game!
2 hours of the best sports talk on the planet. Or at least out of Edmonton, Kentucky.
Bat it up! Oh my! Stokely down the sideline! Can he catch him? Stokely! Wow! Touchdown! Denver! Unbelievable!
Coming to you live, your hosts, TJ and Dan.
Here goes the rain!
Welcome back to the TD Show. Today on the show we got Super Bowl recap, the beatdown that was Seattle and Denver, updated mock draft boards from the Mothership's own Mel Kiper and Todd McShay, National Signing Day discussion, Alabama on top again. We'll talk the Olympics and the problems that have been Sochi. We'll talk a little NBA All-Star Game activities and a lot more, including local sports. I'll give you my weekly guarantee at some point during the show. I'm on a losing streak, getting a little sloppy. I'll try to shore that up this week. Daniel will provide you with his what to watch, and you can't forget about Paula Dan coming up in the second hour of the show.
Don't forget, you can still reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/TheTDShow. Our Twitter handle is @TheTDShow, and you can email the show at mail@thetdshow.com. You can listen to us or watch us live at thetdshow.com on the live feed page. There's a new tab there under the live feed page. You can still listen to us at Spreaker.com/user/TDShow or on the Spreaker app. If you're not able to listen to us or watch us again today live, or you just want to go back and rewatch part of it, you can listen or watch the podcast on the TD Show podcast page, also available on Spreaker and on our YouTube page. If you still haven't checked it out, go on over to our website. You can access our Facebook and Twitter from there. We'll be looking for your questions and comments this morning to share on the air. You can leave comments directly under the video feed there on the website, or you can tweet us your comments or send us your comments on Facebook. But what we'd really like you to do is give us a call. If you're out there and you're listening, you got something you want to talk about, it doesn't matter if it's what we're talking about. Anything you want to talk about, call in, ask us a question, give us a comment. The phone number is 502-509-3190. That's 502-509-3190. I'm actually about to comment that under our video feed there, so you'll have it if you want to call us. Don't forget to vote on our poll. It's located on our homepage of the TD Show. Here's the poll question this morning. If it's legal in their state, should NFL players be allowed to use marijuana? We'll get to that.
Recreationally.
Yeah, just for the heck of it.
Right.
Because, I mean, we'll get to it. It's going to be, I think, a long and in-depth conversation there to talk about.
But go ahead and get on over there, vote on that, give us your comments, thoughts on it. We'll share those when we get there. But let's just go ahead and talk about last weekend, the weekend that was. Seahawks, Denver, just a bad game from the start. You got the safety to start off the game. I was this close to betting the prop on that one, but I wish I had. I think it was 40-1.
You're not supposed to say that you bet on things. You're supposed to say if someone else was going to bet on it, that's what you would have done.
All right, I said I almost did.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't. But, and just a lot of overreaction, I think, this week, talking about how good Seattle is and how bad Denver is. And, I mean, maybe rightly so, but...
Yeah, here's the thing that I've heard this week that's kind of got on my nerves a little bit. Yeah, I'm obviously a Denver fan, but even the things about the Denver's chances being over, that doesn't bother me as bad as people saying this is the best defense of all time. Here's the thing. It wasn't the best defense of all time 2 weeks ago. It wasn't the best defense of all time after they won their way into the Super Bowl, but it is the best defense of all time now. The Broncos had a terrible game. That doesn't make their defense that much better than it was the week before. Still a great defense. Obviously the best in the league. I don't know that going out and saying it's the best defense of all time is something I'd be prepared to do. And just as much as some of the other things we're going to talk about, I'm not prepared to call them a dynasty just yet. Seahawks obviously dominated this game. I knew that things were not looking good when Broadway Joe walked out there in that mink coat or whatever it was, tried to flip a coin and got it snatched from him. I knew that we were going to be in trouble. And we knew what to expect kind of coming in out of the Seahawks. I thought we got what was expected out of their offense and out of their secondary. Their offense wasn't outstanding. Russell Wilson threw it 25 times, completed 18 of them for 206 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's about what he's done all year, been in the 200, 180 to 215 yard range all year long. They didn't rush the ball incredibly well, ran it 29 times for a total of 135 yards. Lynch had the most carries, 15, but he only had 39 yards and a touchdown. Where they scored the bulk of their offensive points was Russell Wilson rolling out scoring on his own. And they scored every way you could in a game. Scored on a field goal, a pick six, a special teams touchdown, a safety, and a field goal. You can still do a drop kick in the NFL. I'm excluding that. Other than that, they scored every possible way that you could score in a game.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk. Of course, we came into this game saying that it was important to Peyton's legacy, and a lot of people have said, well, maybe they should have had Tebow playing quarterback. Well, Manning could have been the 2 interceptions he could have threw for touchdowns and been 38 for 42, had 400 yards, and they would have lost 36 to 22.
Yeah.
So if there's ever been a team effort loss, that was it.
Yeah.
Because from 1 to 55 or 65, however many people are on the roster, they all played terrible.
Yeah, it was bad all around. Even if, like you said, Peyton hadn't thrown those 2 interceptions, I'm not willing to say that both of those were his fault. I'll give him the first interception, let that ride on his back. That second one got tipped. That was an offensive line interception, in my opinion. But you still got the defense allowing the points. Of course, you've got the pick six, which wasn't entirely his fault. I don't know that Tebow would have done better, and I'm a Tebow fan. You also have the being run back and the safety. It was just a rough game altogether. Anything Denver could have done wrong, they did, and anything the Seahawks could have done right, they went right. Let me give you some stats on Denver in the game. They're 34 for 39, 280 yards, a touchdown, interception. The reason they had so many completions, they were completing those under routes. Demaryius Thomas was the leading receiver, but Wes Welker had the most catches. They didn't have time to throw the downfield routes. Now, Peyton did take a few shots, overthrew a few people, and another thing that was out of his control and even out of the offensive line's control was as soon as the passes were reaching their receivers, they were getting drilled. There were a lot of drop balls. I'd say of the 49 passes, of 49 passes he threw, about 42 of them probably hit receivers' hands and were dropped. Of course, the 2 interceptions hurt them. They could not rush the ball at all, which is something I thought they'd be able to do. I didn't give enough credit to the Seahawks front line. They only ran it 14 times for 27 yards. They fumbled it 4 times, lost 2 of those, and they had a lot of 3-and-outs and a lot of turnovers. Seahawks were only forced to punt 1 time by the Broncos defense. I really thought the Broncos front line was going to be able to hang in there, and they did do a good job shutting down Marshawn Lynch, but they couldn't contain what would happen when they shut Marshawn Lynch down inside. They'd fake the handout, Russell Wilson would pop outside with it, and we didn't have anything to do with that. Couldn't stop them. I didn't think that our secondary was as bad as it had been. It was just a perfect storm of things that go wrong.
And all that being said, kind of leads to what everybody's wanted to talk about this weekend, that the Seahawks are now going to form a dynasty because they're so young, and now that Denver's window is closed because Peyton Manning's old.
Right.
And I think the thing that people don't realize, especially about the NFL, is that health is just as important as talent. You could have the most talented players in the world, and then they get hurt during the season. Look at Percy Harvin.
Yeah.
If he's not in that game and he's still injured, that's a big deal.
That's at least 14 points.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that have to fall right for you to win Super Bowl, let alone form a dynasty.
I've already heard the term thrown around that they have a dynasty, that the Seahawks have a dynasty. Regardless of how good they were this year, regardless that they won the Super Bowl, I cannot say that they have a dynasty. They were 7-9 in 2011. They were 7-9 in 2010. They won 6 games in 2009. In 2012, they were 11-5 and lost to Atlanta. We know what they did this year, winning the Super Bowl, but that's not a dynasty. Let me explain to you what a dynasty is. San Francisco 49ers from 1982 to 90 went to the Super Bowl and won it 4 times in 8 years. Over the course of those years, they were 92-37. 92-37. They won twice as many games as they lost over those 8-year period. For 21 years, starting in 1980, running through 2000, they went to the playoffs 17 out of 21 years. That is a dynasty.
So would you say that there's a dynasty in the NFL right now? I would. There's 2 teams that I would call a dynasty. And you could argue maybe one of them's not, but I believe that one of them is.
I believe that if I was going to put a dynasty on an NFL team right now, the closest thing we've seen is 99 to 2010 Patriots. I don't know that I would still consider they are competitive every year. They win a lot of games every year.
They've won 10 games, 11 of their last 12 years,
yeah.
And they've won 4 Super Bowls, 3, 4
if you go back to 97.
Well, so really they've won 3 in the time period I'm talking about. I mean if there's a dynasty right now, that's it.
That's it.
And if you wanted to, you could throw Indy in there, who's won 10 games, 13 out of the past 15 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of those years they won 2 games, but that's you kind of exclude that because you got the gap between Peyton. And they've not been the force in the playoffs that New England has. That would be the argument against them. But I mean, if there's 2 dynasties, they qualify well before the Seahawks or anybody else does in the picture.
But just think about, don't even look at stats. Think about dynasties. Think about what dynasties we've had in the NFL. Think about the Steelers in the 70s. Think about
the Cowboys.
The Cowboys in the late 80s into the 90s. And think about the 49ers I just talked about into the 80s up through the beginning of the 90s. Those are dynasties. Think about the sheer dominance they had over 10 to 15 year periods. The Seahawks have got 2 good years. They weren't even 500 2 years ago. They were under 500, and now they're a dynasty. 2 years doesn't make a dynasty.
Right, and I agree. But I believe in 20 years, when you look back and you look at the Steelers, the 49ers, the Cowboys, when you look at the early 2000s, you'll look at New England as the dynasty of that decade.
I agree. I'm gonna put New England in that category when we look back at it, and we're going to talk about how dominant they were. But you look at New England this year, and like you said, they had a lot of injuries, and things started off rocky for them. They ended up coming on strong.
Which says a lot about their organization, and as much as I hate it, says a lot about Tom Brady too, that he can go out there and still win 10 games, making the playoffs with really nobody.
I want to talk a little bit about what we think a Seahawks will look like next year. Both of their defensive ends are probably going to get released. They make too much money. One's at $8.5 million on a cap hit, and other's $9.6 million. Tate and Baldwin, Golden Tate and Baldwin, their 2 leading receivers, are both going to be in free agency. I have a feeling they're probably going to go after and try and keep Baldwin.
Tate said he'd take a hometown discount to stay. But I mean,
I don't know what kind of he's going to have to take a major discount. Because listen, they're not going to spend any money on Russell Wilson this year. It's coming up here. But next year, and the 2015-16 season, they're going to have to shell out some money to keep Russell Wilson in town, which is something I imagine they're going to want to do. They're going to have to start thinking about that. They've also got Percy Harvin, who's got $11 million coming to him this year, which is probably like a $13 million cap hit.
I can't understand paying them any of their receivers like a number 1 receiver.
Right.
Because I don't think any of them are that talented. That's it. They're really good. They're just not Demaryius Thomas, Larry Fitzgerald, Andre Johnson good.
Right.
But Percy Harvin is a different story because he does so much more for you besides being a number 1 receiver.
Well, he's already getting paid like a number 1
right.
receiver. And how many more years does he have left?
As fast as he looked last night, I don't know.
That being said, let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen with Denver in the next few years. What do you think?
Well, the thing that it is, people talk about how the Seahawks are so young.
Right.
And then they look at Denver like they're old, but if you look at the age and you take Peyton out.
And Champ Bailey.
Right. Everybody looks at Peyton because he's the best player on the team and says they're old. But take Peyton out of the picture because he doesn't play like a 37-year-old quarterback.
No.
So take him out of the picture.
And the way he plays, he could play till he's 47.
Right. And if you take him out of the picture, the combined starters for each team, I think the Seahawks are, 26.3 for the Seahawks.
Yeah, and Denver's 26 and a half.
26 and a half. I mean, they're basically the same age.
Yeah, look at the star players on Denver's team. Look in their defensive side, in Woodyard and Harris and Carter and Trevathan and Von Miller and Phillips. They're all 25, 26 years old. Look at the offensive side. You got Wes Welker. He's older, and we're not going to count him, but he's not 40. We've also got Demaryius Thomas, Julius Thomas, Eric Decker. Julius Thomas is a second-year player. Thomas and Decker, they're third-year players. This is their third year in the league. They're 25 years old.
Yeah. And I mean, Decker, of course, is going to be a free agent. While it's kind of assumed that he might give a hometown discount as well, you got to think he's probably going to get paid by somebody more than they can afford.
Right. I've got his stats here somewhere. It's going to be difficult for Decker to stay. I think he wants to stay. I think the Broncos want him to stay.
And I think he's a really good wide receiver, but those numbers are inflated because of who his quarterback is. If he's playing somewhere else as a number 2 or 3,
well, he's not going to be a number 2. There's maybe 2 teams in the league. He could go to Arizona and be a number 2, and if he went to the line,
so
he would be a number 2.
You think he's good enough to be a number 1 receiver for somebody?
Yeah.
I don't.
I think he's pretty good.
I think if Peyton Manning's not there, he's not that
Look
good.
at his stats last year. I don't have them pulled up, but he was...
Yeah, but he's got Demaryius Thomas across the field from him.
Exactly.
Demaryius Thomas is
He's
really good.
inflating Demaryius Thomas stats, too. Listen, he had 1,288 yards this year as a number 2 receiver, 11 touchdowns, 87 receptions. He would be a number 1 receiver anywhere else.
He doesn't get 1,000 yards anywhere else.
He doesn't have Peyton Manning thrown to him anywhere else.
Right.
But if he's the only weapon on their team anywhere else, he's going to be twice as good as all but 5 receivers in the NFL.
With these receivers, you got to think how defenses have to cover him and Thomas and Welker and
Julius Thomas.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I was
Moreno.
assuming. And I just think somewhere else flaws show with him.
Okay, I think he wants to come back. I don't know.
Of the 4 receivers, I think he's the 4th least important to keep. You got Demaryius Thomas over the top. You got Welker running his cross routes, and you got Thomas, the big tight end, who can block and catch on 3rd down.
We've got 4 tight ends. We could get rid of
I'm counting the first 4 in the pack here.
I don't know. I think that
you would get rid of one of those 3 before you got rid of him?
I would get rid of Welker before I got rid of Eric Decker. I think that you can do a lot of things with the running back that you can do with Wes Welker that you cannot get another number 2 that's going to be as good as Eric Decker is. When you have to put a shutdown corner on both sides of the field, you've got to put safety help back on both sides of the field. Think about the trouble that's causing defenses. You want to keep both of those guys if you can.
Yeah, but I think he's the 4th most important. I mean, I can see the argument for maybe Welker, but
Moreno also doesn't want to leave. He's going to be in free agency. I'm pretty sure they might have to get rid of him. They kind of knew this was coming. They drafted Monty Ball last year.
Yeah, coming into this season, he wasn't expected to carry much of a load. I mean,
he'd always been hurt last year,
right?
And they thought Ball was going to come in, and then Moreno turned on. Ball had 120 rushes for 590 yards. He averaged 4.7 yards per carry, which was actually more than Moreno, and he had 4 touchdowns.
And there for a while, I mean, it was split evenly between them carrying until about week 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then Ball fumbled it a few times, and we saw Ronnie Hillman come in and fumble and get shut down. Ball actually did a lot better towards the end of the year. Was able to hold on to the ball. I'm pretty optimistic about him about what we could do with Monte Ball. I like Noshawn Moreno, but I don't know that the value is there for what they'd have to pay to keep Noshawn Moreno. So I think he'll probably be gone. The defense also has a lot of questions that's going to be coming up. Who they're going to re-sign, what's going to happen. I think for their defense to improve next year, Danny Trevathan is going to have to step up a little bit and be a vocal leader. He is a leader on the field. He needs to kind of, get that defense under his wing and kind of steer him a little bit. He had 129 tackles last year. But that being said, both of their defensive ends are up for free agency. I think they'll both re-sign. They're going to go do anything they can not to let Sean Phillips get released. Robert Ayers is the other defensive end, and he is going to be a free agent also. I don't know that they'll go after him as hard, but I think they'll pay Phillips whatever it takes to keep him. Roger Cromartie also be a free agent. All indications that they will keep him, but if they don't keep him, I don't think it's as big of a deal as people think it's going to be.
Here's the deal with the Denver defense. If there was a war, wins above replacement in football, like baseball, the Denver defense is so bad that none of their wars are going to be very high. You can replace them with about anybody, and you're probably going to get about the same production from the entire defense.
And assuming we can keep Harris and Carter healthy next year on Denver's defense, I don't think that missing Rogers Cromartie will be that big of a deal. That being said, I think they'll keep him. Champ Bailey's going to be around for a couple more years. I've heard he might move to safety. I don't know how that's going to work. But that's
he needs to move to the nursing homes where he needs to move to.
Also, we've got Quentin Jammer, who's going to be coming up playing cornerback next year. He came in and played some at the end of the year and didn't look too bad. Woodyard is up for free agency. I think that he'll be let go. I wish he wouldn't. He's my favorite defense player on the team just because he wears my old number and he's from Kentucky. But that being said, I don't think he's going to stick around. They've got Dan Trevathan there, and I don't think that they'll keep Woodyard.
Trevathan's GK graduate too, right?
Right. But I don't know exactly. Going to be a lot of questions that we're going to see answered. I think that they're going to probably try and pick up some defensive help in the draft this year.
Yeah, you got to go defense. I mean,
they've got more offense than they can use.
Right.
Now, one thing that we're not talking about that I think will help Denver next year in getting better is Ryan Clady and Dan Kloppen. The senior, Dan Kloppen, and the center. The starting center up until this year was Dan Kloppen, got hurt in training camp. And then Ryan Clady, the tackle who got hurt in training camp, will both be back next year. And if we saw anything in the Super Bowl that our offensive line wasn't as good as we thought it was.
Manny being Manny.
Yeah, so there we go.
Well, since we're kind of on the subject of talking about teams next year, let's discuss some NFL mock drafts. We saw the four letters Mel Kiper and Todd McShay released an updated draft board yesterday. I believe it was yesterday morning. And Kiper has Manziel going to Houston. Both of them have Greg Robinson, offensive tackle out of Auburn, going to the Rams. Kiper has Clowney going third to the Jaguars, Bridgewater fourth to the Browns, and Sammy Watkins, wide receiver out of Clemson, going to the Raiders fifth. McShay has Clowney 1 to Houston, Bridgewater third to Jaguars, Bortles from Central Florida going to the Browns, and then Manziel dropping to fifth and going to the Raiders. Which board do you think's most likely?
I like Manziel. Like I said, going to Houston. That's where I thought he would go originally. The more I thought about it, I think he might actually go fourth to the Jaguars. And I think Clowney, I guess I'm going to agree with a little bit of McShay. Blake Bortles, I have watched a little tape on him lately. I didn't really know anything about him until after the season was over, but I have watched him a little bit. And I think Blake Bortles is pretty good, but I don't think that he will go above Manziel. I don't know that even Bridgewater is going to go above Manziel just because I think the Jaguars and Manziel will fit better. I do think Manziel would be a good fit in Houston. I like that there, and I think Bridgewater could even go to Houston. I think once we see who gets the number one pick, I think it'll be a lot easier to decide where everybody else is going. Clowney is still convinced that he's going number one. I saw an interview this week. He's 100% certain he's going to go number one.
You know, everybody wants to pick. Everybody in the public thinks that the number one pick should be a quarterback because that's the sexiest thing to do. But we saw with Houston, they picked Mario Williams over Vince Young. So.
Right. And, there's even the value for a quarterback, honestly, is first or the second round. That's where you're going to get the most out of a quarterback. That's where a guy like Zach Mettenberger is going to go. He's going to fall down and go in the first or the second round because he's hurt right now. And I think that's going to be a great pickup for somebody. Maybe the Browns, with their second round pick, if they don't take a quarterback here, could get him, and he's got a big arm, can throw it way down the field, and he's going to give him a little time to work. And I think that could be a big second round pick. We agree that Bridgewater, Bortles, and Manziel are all, maybe none of them are right-away franchise quarterbacks, but they're all pretty good quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. And we think really that's all that Houston needs. So if I wasn't going to draft a quarterback number one, I'd trade down to 3 through 5. Yeah. Let somebody else take the number one pick with whatever quarterback they wanted,
and then you could get another pick and get another quarterback.
That's something we talked about before the season was even over, when we first started getting the draft orders, was that we didn't think Houston would stay at number 1, and I still don't think they're going to stay at number 1 unless they've decided, look, Johnny Manziel is our guy. He's a Texas kid. We've got to have him. And as long as that's not their mindset, if they're not dead set 100% on getting Johnny Manziel, I think that they're going to probably trade down, probably 4th or so, and then try and pick up a quarterback there, which I think would be the best plan for them. Try and get a little value out of that number 1
Or
spot.
if they still wanted Clowney, I mean, a lot of people think Clowney would still be there if they did that.
Yeah.
And I mean, Clowney, you got Clowney and you got J.J. Watt, which would, I mean,
And we don't remember Lucas called
Right.
in and told us that, and I can't even imagine that defense. If Clowney lives up to his potential, we know that he didn't express his full potential in his last year of college, and I guess he didn't have a whole lot of drive to do that. But
right, because
Clowney and
look
Watt
how he
would be-
played, and he's still projected number 1
Yeah.
on the draft board.
Clowney and Watt would be sick as defensive ends on each side. But that being said, I think if Houston takes their number 1 pick, they're going to take Manziel. If they don't, that they'll trade down and they'll probably get Bridgewater at that point.
If I'm Manziel and I fought a 5th and the Raiders want to draft me, I say no.
Yeah,
I mean, I pull an Eli.
or an Elway.
Yeah.
Say, I ain't going there.
I'm not going to Oakland.
I would not
Because,
go to Oakland
I mean,
either.
you've never seen a quarterback work in Oakland.
I looked at how many starting quarterbacks they've had in the past 10 years. I think it's like 14 or 13.
I mean, I know it's bad publicity, but I just say, look, man,
Yeah.
I'll take less money, go somewhere else, and try to be successful.
He's got. I mean, it's not like he's got an untarnished image. He can afford to do this.
That's true. That's true. We're going up against the break here. Just a reminder, if you're listening to us on Spreaker, you need to refresh your browser. And after we get done with the break here in about 3 minutes, if you're listening to the audio on the tdshow.com, you need to do the same. But if you're listening to the video, or if you're watching the video and watching and listening, you can just leave us pulled up there and get a little sneak peek. After the break, we'll talk Martin and Incognito text. We'll talk a little National Signing Day, talk some Jameis Winston, and then try to get to the Sochi Olympics. We'll be right back.